I remember very clearly in our household thinking that Dad was still going to walk through the door.
Number 4, when you realise your grief will always be with you, but it no longer captures all of your attention.
Grief is like a rock that you carry around in your pocket, and the weight of the rock doesn't change over time. But as you continue to walk and journey, you get stronger in carrying the rock.
I think when you can twist or change the little things that happen into a positive day by day, that's going to help you.
The number one most common response for knowing when you're making progress in grief is... Welcome back to another episode of Good Grief. Today we're going to be going through the 21 ways that you know you're making progress in grief. And these have come in from our Good Grief family inside of our community.
Our community, yep.
And these aren't the only ways, but also they're not the most popular, but we are going to share the most given response.
Yeah, the most common.
From
common, our community.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
these aren't limited to, but this is what our community has said for them.
Totally. And also, these are like, if you feel like you listen through these and you're like, well, that's not me and I could never experience that, and how could that ever be true? That's okay.
Totally.
The whole goal of this podcast is just to share insights and ideas that can help you on the journey of grief towards hope and meaning. And that might be really hard to hear right now, but we know 11 years down the road that it's totally possible. And so that's our hope for you.
Yeah, so these are totally like individual to individuals in our community, and you might experience just one of these, you might experience multiple at different stages, you might relapse and experience them again or in a different way.
Or they might just be great reflections or like ahas where you're like, I don't feel like I'm making any progress. And then you hear maybe like number 7 on the list and you're like, actually...
You're like, oh yeah, that's me. You're like,
I experienced that.
Okay.
So...
All right. You're like, okay, that's me. Yeah.
And we're going to use the term progress loosely as well. It's not a straight line. It's not a 7-step process. It's none of that grief. And experiencing grief, you would know that. So it's individual, and that's what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to say the exact same thing instead.
We're joined by
our special
our
guest, our 10-week-old Nazare, our daughter. She's playing with Tigger and Eeyore at the moment.
Yep. Tigger's her new favorite best friend. She wouldn't stay asleep, so she's having some Tigger time.
So you may get some amens and little adages.
Rattles.
Yeah.
And some
All right, let's get into this.
Yeah.
So these are in no particular order except for number 21, which is the most common response that we've seen in terms of when you're making progress in grief.
So stick around if you want to hear that one.
So let's just kick things off.
Let's do it.
All right, Kaylee.
All right. You know you're making progress in grief when...
You can get out of bed.
Hallelujah.
Which is easier said than done when you get thrown in the deep end.
Yeah. And I don't think everyone is going to say that this was a thing for them, but I think very commonly this would be
totally
one.
Depending on your circumstances, you might have kids that you've just got to get up for, like a job that hasn't given you time off work, which that's a conversation for another episode. That makes me angry.
Yeah. Sometimes you've just got no choice, but you got to get up.
But you may have had the feeling, I wish I could just stay in bed. So that's number 1. Number 2, you know you're making progress in grief when
you aren't angry. I think grief brings anger to pretty much everyone. You're not going to be not mad losing someone. So does that make sense?
Yep, that does make sense.
Okay, cool. I know last time I had to kind of explain myself a bit better. No, that
makes sense, yeah. It's interesting. I've got, anger's not, as our episode with our psychologist, Sean, anger is an emotion that can really serve us or it can be really harmful to us depending on which way we use it. And so it's very common for anger to rise up when we lose somebody.
Yeah, I think you explained that a bit in your story in episode number 2.
Yes. Number 3 is when you accept the fact that it happened. And I think this is massive as well.
Coming out of denial.
And you may or may not be familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, and she framed up what's known as the 5 stages of grief or grieving.
That she explains are not linear.
That's right. And they're not limited to.
Yep.
That was just her experience from sitting bedside with people who were dying. However, anger is one of those, denial is one of those. And so this one here, when you accept the fact that it happened, I remember very clearly in our household thinking that Dad was still going to walk through the door.
Oh, 100%.
Come home from work.
Yep. I think 99% of people would experience that. Yeah. Just thinking.
Or wishing.
Oh, it just feels like they're away.
Yeah, on a long trip. Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Okay. Number 4. When you realize your grief will always be with you, but it no longer captures all of your attention.
So this is more the idea, and again, going back to the last point of those 5 stages or 5 ideas, is acceptance. It's accepting, but I think it's a different kind of acceptance. It's realizing that, hey, this thing's with me like a tattoo. It's going to be here until the day I die. The tattoo, like on my arms, most of them, thankfully, were done by great artists. Some of them not by the best, and so maybe the ink or the work
by friends,
wasn't great, and some of them by friends. Yes, some of them drawn by me. But like on my fingers here, they are fading and they are wearing, and grief changes like that. It doesn't mean they're not still there, but they've changed over time. And that's, I think, what this point means, when you realize that your grief will always be with you, but it no longer grabs you each day.
I also think like it's also your subconscious that's not just thinking of the grief all the time and bringing you back to it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So it's when your subconscious...
Subconscious and conscious.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think, when you're not subconsciously just all the time thinking about it.
For sure.
Yeah. Number 5.
You're making progress in grief when?
When the boulder you were carrying feels like just more like a rock now.
And this one's so interesting. I read somewhere recently, forgive me for not knowing who said this, but that grief is like a rock that you carry around in your pocket. And the weight of the rock doesn't change over time, but as you continue to walk and journey, you get stronger in carrying the rock. And what felt uncomfortable at first soon becomes the norm. It's like wearing a new pair of shoes. They're uncomfortable at first. And we recently bought new runners.
Yes, we did.
And my calves were hurting because it's a different shoe than I was wearing, but I've worn them now for kilometers and kilometers and, different runs. And now my legs are used to them. It's sort of this idea of carrying this rock, which is grief. It stays in your pocket, but it no longer feels as heavy as it once used to because you've gained strength.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Number 6, when you get through the whole day and it's been an anniversary of the death or a birthday or Mother's Day of your loved one. It's big, hey?
It is big.
Because they don't stop. They come around every year.
Yeah, and someone had reached out to me just the other day and was just like, I'm struggling. And I said, yeah, what's going on? What are you dealing with? And it's like the anniversary just really hit hard this year. And I was like, let me send you our podcast. Have you listened to it? She was like, no, please send the link. So, yeah.
What episode is that?
Oh, what number was it?
I'm putting you to the test. We do have a podcast on...
I think it was 4.
Okay. Yeah. On anniversaries, on special days.
Anniversaries and special occasions. Firsts and special occasions, I think it's called. Yeah.
Nice.
But which includes anniversaries and birthdays and...
Yeah, because the first year of all of those firsts isn't necessarily the toughest. Sometimes it'll smack you at year 3 or year 5, for different reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, number 7. You're making progress in grief when you get a decent night's sleep. Man, sleep is so necessary. And I think we should do an episode on sleep.
Yeah, I think so.
And we'll bring in a sleep expert, I think.
Yeah, sleep is so crucial to feeling normal, like your energy levels and just how you deal with the day.
Totally. Actually, side note, I heard Dr. Amen. I love his stuff on Instagram, and he talks about the brain for the most part of his work, and depression and anxiety. He talks about sleep and a routine that he does every night before he goes to sleep, and he said he's been doing this for many, many years, is he'll lie down in bed and he'll search like a treasure hunt for the good moments in the day or the progress or the wins. And he said he'll start at the very moment he wakes up of that day and work through hour by hour, because he said it's hard to search for what were the good things, because
This is while laying in bed with eyes closed.
Before going to sleep.
Okay.
And it programs the brain, one, to search for the good, which is massively powerful in our progress. Two, it sets the brain up for sleep to have better dreams and a better sleep.
Because your subconscious is focusing on the positive.
Right, it makes sense.
Yeah.
If we think about the worst thing in the world right before we go to sleep, that's not going to help us when we sleep. So I think this practice, I'm very interested to look into that a whole lot more. I also think, as Christians, it's also why prayer before sleep is instrumental to sleep. So number 7 is when you get a decent night's sleep.
And we have a recommendation for a app that we use sometimes. We should use it more. Lectio 365, if you haven't heard about it, has a morning and an evening like meditational type devotion, and beautiful to go to sleep to if you're struggling to go to sleep or you are focusing on more negative thoughts. Try that out.
All right, number 8. You're making progress in grief when
you can laugh without guilt.
Man, we've talked about this many a time.
Yeah, episode recently on
but laughter
laughing,
is so important. That age-old saying, laughter is the best medicine. It is. It feels so much better to laugh.
Totally, and not just in losing someone. It could be, in a separation, or, you lost a friend. You've, been. What's that?
Lost a friendship?
Yeah, friendship. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the word. You can just feel like, I don't feel like I should be joyous or be able to laugh.
It's that shame factor.
Yeah.
Yeah, guilt, shame.
Yeah.
All right, number 9. You're making progress when you can listen to their favourite song without collapsing.
Isn't music just a arrow to the emotions? Like a big red button.
Totally. You could probably look up 1,000,001 country songs that speak exactly to that.
Is there any one of those songs for you that was
I mean, like Dad's funeral, there were 2 songs specifically that were played. One was
the worship one that your cousin sang?
Well, she sung that, but 2 at the funeral just played.
Oh, okay.
One was Elvis and one was Jim Reeves. And so I can remember in the early days when I couldn't feel like I could, when I felt like, there was this weird spot where I felt like I needed to cry, but I couldn't. And I could put one of these songs on and man, it would bring me to tears so quickly. So that was like using music for good to cry. But like, if mum heard those songs, she'd just cry at the drop of a hat. You know what I mean? So, being able to listen to them now and not cry is a pretty beautiful thing.
All right. Number 10.
Mm-hmm.
When looking at their photographs feels less painful.
Yeah.
I think photos is just like music, isn't it?
It totally is. The memories are so real and so vivid, so raw.
Yeah. It puts you back into a moment, just like a song does.
Yep.
A memory from a photo does.
Yeah, I'm grateful. I've got a little folder on my phone, all for Dad, and I can find them as quickly as I need.
Yeah,
and they pop up in these memories, and it's just, it's beautiful now. Just like songs. Yeah.
I wish I had more photos of Mum on Facebook so that I'd get those
and
memories.
Your photos.
Yeah.
All right, number 11. When you get through the day and it was better than the day before. I love this one. I think it's amazing.
it just shows that incrementally it can be like a millimeter versus like of progress, but it's still progress.
Yeah, totally. And I think a great way to look at it is just look at 2 days next to each other. So think about maybe today, how today's been, and think about yesterday. And if you had to choose one, which one was better? The loss is equal, but which day had a bit more sunshine, if I was to use that metaphor, in the day? And if we can build upon that, today was a little bit better than yesterday. Doesn't mean that tomorrow will be better than today, but hey, we can actually acknowledge that today was better than yesterday. And that's a pivotal point in our thinking.
You can add that forward to that brain practice that you do before bed. I think the brain practice. Where are we up to?
Number 12.
12.
You know you're making progress when?
When you start to plan holidays again.
That's big.
Yeah.
Because, again, I think guilt is attached to that. I shouldn't be going and having fun because they're not here. All right, number 13.
When the good days outnumber the bad days.
Yeah, so this is quite interesting based on number 11. Yeah, when you can start to count up that, hey, in the week,
in this week,
there's been 4 days better than 3 days.
Yeah.
And there's a tipping point.
There's only one day where I cried. And yeah. All right. You know you're making progress when?
You can trust in God again. That's a big one. Because our trust, if you trusted in God before you lost them, and then you lose them, it's rocked. It really is. We just listened to Tim Keller yesterday on a sermon. You can look up one of the greatest sermons I've heard in regards to suffering and pain, and where God is.
Yeah, where God is in that. Yeah, for sure.
And it was actually shared to me by June Park, the author of As Long As You Need, who's coming on the podcast really soon, which is really exciting.
So exciting.
So we've been texting these sermons back and forth, and Tim Keller's been a big part of that. But trusting in God again, it's quite interesting. He shares these 2 psalms that don't end positively.
I think he said it's the only
2 psalms that don't end on a high praise note. And so he pulls that apart, and you find that it's okay to take those thoughts, doubts, and anger to God, as long as you do take them to Him. So if you want to search that on YouTube, just type in Tim Keller, Dark Times, and you'll find the sermon, how to go through dark times. All right. Number 15, when you can move some of their stuff. This is big too.
Yeah. I mean, not everyone has to deal with their loved one's stuff, but it's a big deal.
Yeah. It was big in our household. I know that. It was so difficult. What do we do with the clothes, with the things, with the
trinkets,
do? Like Dad's car.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That was a process. We do not have time on this podcast to work through that process. It's big. No. It's really big.
Did we do a podcast on this, on about their stuff?
I think so.
I feel like we did. Guys, we've done so many episodes now that we can't remember all the ones that we've done. Yes. On the spot.
Yep. So that's a big one. Take it slow. That's just my recommendation. Yeah. Bring a friend in, help.
Totally. Yeah.
Bring a friend in.
Definitely. They're helpful.
Okay.
16.
Yeah. You know you're making progress when?
When you finally learn to smile again. Oh, I mean, smiling's like laughter as well. It's so good for the soul. It's simple.
It releases
when
endorphins.
You can do it.
It releases endorphins in your body that give you a feel-good feeling.
Yes. Love it. 17. When you can visit your favorite places you visited as a couple or with your family member or whoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, those special places. It's like a song. It's like a photo. It triggers that memory, that special
It could be a special restaurant.
feeling.
It could just be going to the movies. It could be walking in your favorite park.
That beach.
Yep. A holiday that you went to. Totally.
The drive-ins. Whatever you did together, often traditions. Yeah.
All right, number 18. You know you're making progress when you stop worrying about making progress.
Like a
it's
jewel.
yeah. What's the word for it? I don't know, but
It's not an oxymoron, is it? No, it's
No.
like a...
It's like a tongue twist. It's kind of just twisty. When I read it, I didn't understand it in our community. I didn't understand it, and so I kind of skipped over it. But I've come back to it to realize this is a really powerful point. You know you're making progress in grief when you stop worrying about making progress. I think that thought in itself has now become revolutionary for me, because I often think about making progress in everything that I do.
You do.
And so just to let it be, and to know that, you know, today has enough worry of its own. I'm not going to worry about tomorrow, as it says in Matthew.
Yeah, I think when you've relaxed about the thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whew. All right. We are down to our final...
5?
Oh, I was going to say 3. 3.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm going back a couple.
Yeah. Okay, number 19. You know you're making progress in grief when?
When it feels like you take a step backward, but you're still able to rest in God.
Yeah.
I think that Tim Keller really touched on that in that sermon.
Yep.
And he really explains it well. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do. And when you're able to rest in him, even though you realize you're still there. You're still in it, and you've still got a long way to go with it.
Totally. And you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
You got more questions.
Yep.
Totally. All right, number 20. You know you're making progress in grief when you can find gratitude in small daily things.
I think when you can twist or change the little things that happen into a positive day by day, that's going to help you. Like the small incremental things that you can do each day, this is one of them. And if you can learn to do that, you are going to make that progress.
And we just stack them on top of each other.
Yeah.
And, it's pretty cool when we first learned about glimmers. It's just finding those small glimmers throughout a day and counting them. And it goes back to that thought before bed. What's one thing today that I can be grateful for? It's going to help you in your sleep, but then also throughout the day as well.
Yeah. If you can make it a habit, you can go back and listen to our episode with Dr. Gina about habits. That'd be super powerful.
All right, we've reached number 21, which is actually number 1. It's the most common response by far. I would say 50% of the responses were based around this.
Yeah.
It is one that I would have said as well, as the answer.
Yeah.
You were going to stop me then?
Yeah, I was going to say stop before
Okay.
you say it.
What were you going to say?
I want everyone
To
who's
think.
listening to think about it and think, I'm sure a lot of you could guess what it is.
Yes.
So have a guess right now before we say it.
Drum roll. The number 1 most common response for knowing when you're making progress in grief is when you can talk about them without bursting into tears.
100%.
And there were different formats of that, without crying, without falling on the ground in a ball and a mess, without, losing it at a thought of them.
And it's not to say that you won't ever again.
Totally.
It's just that generally you can go through a day without just becoming a mess.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's no problem with being a mess. And there's no problem with not being a mess.
And you need to do that.
Yes.
To deal with grief.
Mm-hmm.
You need to do that. That is
Absolutely.
progress
Yeah.
to start with.
And that's what mourning is.
Yeah.
Mourning is other people witnessing your grief. Grief is the natural response to loss from the body. Mourning is other people witnessing your grief. And so falling in a ball, collapsing in a ball, totally part of the mourning process, totally part of the grieving process.
Yeah, and if you don't, people will just think you're okay. It's like communicating. If they say, "Hey, how are you?" and you just lie and say, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm doing all right." If you don't communicate, "Hey, actually, it's not a good day. If you could just ask me how I'm feeling or be there or whatever." Yeah. So
That's our number one.
There it is.
And
Number
that's
one,
our,
folks.
And that's our 21 ways that you might know or feel that you're making progress through grief. Like we said, they are not the be all and end all. They also don't need to be for you right now, but hopefully there was one in there that you just think, wow, that's me. Maybe there's more than one, and that's an opportunity for you to celebrate just the progress that you're making. As we can hear
Nazare agrees.
our daughter agreeing.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for today.
Yeah.
It's been fun.
Has been good.
It's actually been helpful.
Yeah, totally.
I feel better recognizing some of those.
Yeah. We hope it's been helpful for you. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, big love from us.
Ciao.
Ciao.